Hello, and you are listening to Eco Justice Radio. We present environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame, featuring voices not necessarily heard on mainstream media. Eco Justice Radio acknowledges that we record the show on the traditional territory of the Tongva and all of their relatives. Welcome, I am Jack Eit. On today's show, The Kumeyaay Way of Life, we air parts of an Emmy-nominated documentary, First People Kumeyaay, from Explore San Diego, originally on KPBS in 2014. It features multiple Kumeyaay folks, as well as several academic scientists. We also will hear the story from the Kumeyaay tradition, Coyote and the Rabbit, as told by Stan Rodriguez. Dr. Stanley Rodriguez has been president of Kumeyaay Community College since 2018. He serves as a council member of the Santa Ysabel Band of the Iipay Nation of the Kumeyaay people. Governor Gavin Newsom appointed Dr. Rodriguez to the California Native Heritage Commission in 2021. The Kumeyaay Nation at one time lived throughout San Diego and northern Baja, California region. There are now 13 reservations scattered across San Diego County and 4 in northern Baja. The Kumeyaay people who live on and off these reservations share a heritage that goes back, in their words, to the beginning of time. Here at Eco Justice Radio, people often ask, why do you give an Indigenous land acknowledgement before every show? Well, that's because the many races, ethnicities, and creeds of people who've come to settle on these lands across North America forget or never knew what and who came before them. A particular problem here in California is how separated the built cities are from the wild native coastal sage, chaparral, oak, woodland, hillsides, and valleys, let alone the native people who inhabited them. What about the fact that we have channelized and concrete-filled all of the riverbeds and plowed under the estuaries and wetlands where all swimming and flying creatures used to live? As is demonstrated in this show, the traditional inhabitants of San Diego and northern Baja, California, understood quite well how to live off this land and how to manage it to protect against wildfires and droughts and all the other things that are happening these days. We have much to learn from the first peoples of the Americas, and for that reason, we share this excellent documentary on the Kumeyaay with Nick Nordquist, director-editor, and Michael R. Johnson and Bob Sly as producers. For a list of all the people appearing in this film, check out our podcast show notes.
Who am I? I have felt the strength of your creations, the winds and the great ocean waves, the frozen skies and the burning lands. I hear your thunder and feel your lightning. I smell the trees, the plants, and the flowers. I taste the fruits and waters so pure. I hear your creatures sing and cry. Greatest of the blue ocean above, Mahakwitai, I am human, I am man, I am Tipai.
Everybody associates Indians with Plains Indians or, the Mohawks or well-known Indians. But right here in this beautiful San Diego County, there were Kumeyaay people.
The reservations have been here for 100 years, and our people have been here for thousands of years.
The earliest sites that we have dated in San Diego County right now are about 10,000 years old.
Our people have been here, we say, from the beginning of time. Archaeologists say thousands of years, and they've seen the sites here by the coast and the mountains and the desert.
We have the most diverse geography of any other tribe in the United States because we go from the coast to the mountains to the desert in our traditional territory.
What the Kumeyaay have always kind of said about themselves is because it's such a harsh environment, because it always is changing on them, they learned how to best adapt themselves to the environment. So they have this seasonal pattern, this rhythmic pattern that they follow, and that they're very in tune with how the seasons change, how the resources change, and where they're best suited to be at any time of the year.
My ancestors and elders used to be down at the ocean, and then they'd come out up to the mountains to gather acorns and shoot deer. And then when it got too cold here, they went to the desert. And then when it got too hot there, they came back and went traveling again, where there was good food, good water, they went there.
This is what we did for thousands and thousands of years. Mother Earth gives us everything we need: the food, the shelter.
The Kumeyaay in this area, because there's different Kumeyaay groups across San Diego. The one specifically in this area would winter down here in the desert and creek areas. You'll get a lot of mesquite there. They'll harvest the beans.
The normal seasonal migration was the wintertime. You're going to be down here in the desert where it's warm in the 70s and 80s. And in summertime, you go back up to the mountains or you go down to the coast.
In the springtime, the people would go to the ocean and gather mussels and clams.
The abalone was a big food sustenance down at the coast.
Right by Point Loma, they called it Matñis, or Blackland. And there was abalone all over out there. Our people were also fishermen, too. We were people of the ocean, of the mountains, and of the desert.
From the coast to El Centro, I believe it's like 130 miles. And if you've seen that mountain terrain, it's all overhead chaparral, and you only have agave sandals. You're carrying everything you own with you at the same time. So it's quite a trek, and it probably takes at least a couple weeks to do.
I mean, we would go back and forth and trade. We would trade the Kumeyaay from the ocean with the Kumeyaay in the mountain, the Kumeyaay in the desert. We had these trading routes that the Spaniards used later on.
We're working on figuring out where the main trail systems are. We've recorded the trail along this edge, but for the most part, Old Highway 80 and the 8 took advantage of the old native trails, and so they're, for the most part, destroyed now.
Oh yeah, Highway 8. I mean, it's the Kumeyaay Highway. There's a reason it's named that, And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So those were old walking trails. That's just where they happened to put the freeway.
Having the Kumeyaay Highway now, I mean, it acknowledges that, we as the first people, we've always been here. The Kumeyaay Highway goes through many of the reservations. It goes to Viejas, goes to part of Iipay, goes to La Posta, Manzanita, and Campo. San Diego has more reservations than any other county in the country.
We are the Sequan band of Kumeyaay Indians. Like Manzanita, they're a band. Campo's a band. And Villas is a band. But when it comes down to all of us together, that's the nation. We are the Kumeyaay Nation.
And these are the reservations, the Kumeyaay communities that are federally recognized. There's a lot of Kumeyaay people who are not federally recognized. They didn't have reservations. From what I was told, there were many more communities of Kumeyaay than there are now. I mean, thousands and thousands, 40, 50,000 Kumeyaay here, on both sides of the border. The border, what it did is it cut straight right through Kumeyaay territory. I mean, Kumeyaay territory went north of Oceanside all the way down to about 100 miles east of Ensenada, and from the Pacific Ocean all the way into the desert. And there were even Kumeyaay bands in Algodones, close to Fort Yuma.
On this side of the international border, it's 3,700,000 acres of land that the Kumeyaay existed on.
Until, then we get contact, from European, and then things kind of changed.
All this land was taken away, and a lot of our people were pushed out of our traditional lands. We were pushed more up into the mountains. There were still people that would go down every now and then, but it did disrupt the migration cycle.
Before there was anybody that owned any property, we used to roam. Free to go where we wanted to go.
The ranchers started coming in to Southern California at the beginning of the 1800s.
When the pioneers started coming in, then they had private property fenced it off. You couldn't go through there no more.
We have some accounts of their early years, and there's a lot of conflict with the native tribes, a couple massacres, there's ambushes. It just goes back and forth from both groups.
So then as time went on, our culture slowly began to die because we couldn't do what we used to do.
Our people haven't been able to, kind of go out and harvest in over 100 years out in the deserts. And, since the reservation system was, at least ours was back in the late 1800s. So, everybody's been pushed in the system, and we are no longer part of the seasonal migration.
All this land was taken away, and if you ever read that book, Pushed Into the Rocks, that's what happened.
What happened when the ranchers came in is all the people from these areas that we know of got moved up to Table Mountain. So they were shipped out and were forced to live up there.
Here's just surviving out here, surviving out here in the hills, We had it pretty rough.
It was a tough time for our people But our people are strong and very adaptable. And if something changes, we can adapt to anything.
So what you got with the Kumeyaay, and because they're so innately adapted to the natural environment, 80 to 90% of the plants out here were used for something. They found some kind of use for them, whether they ate them, whether they used them for medicine, or just everyday purposes. Everything out here has a purpose. They'll find something to do with it.
There's food, there's shelter. Everything you need in life you can find out here.
It may not look like there's a lot out here to eat, but once you learn through culture, through what somebody's taught you, then you understand what really is there, and then there's an abundance of things out there.
I've heard before people say, there's no food out here and everything, but there's a lot. And I got to say this. My wife, cooking class with Martha, she was doing at Kumeyaay Community College. She would take her students out into the hills, and they would gather the wild potatoes, the miner's lettuce, yucca, all these different things. And they were getting full while they were gathering these things and bringing it back.
Where we're standing, it's a resource gathering area. Almost anywhere you go in San Diego is a resource gathering area because they used everything. What you have right here, this is sugar bush. The red clusters on top could be eaten. The leaves are actually sweet to eat as well.
The yucca, the flowers of the yucca, once boiled, it tastes almost like artichoke hearts.
So this is a Mojave yucca. Aside from being eaten, what they would do is they would peel back these fibers until they had enough that they could sew them together. And they would make baskets, and they would make carrying cases with the fibers. And they're fairly strong, and they hold up pretty well. And when they dry out, they actually get even stronger, and they hold form. I know for a fact that it holds pretty well, because I've torn my pants out here and sewed them back together with the stuff. So they hold up pretty well.
Also around September, in the mountains, there was a harvest of pinyon nuts.
The pinyon pines were very important to our people. Actually, this area used to be an ancient pinyon pine forest that burnt down.
And then dropping down into the desert in the wintertime, harvesting mesquite beans, things like that.
So this is the cat's claw acacia. It's our local variety of mesquite. When you get down to the desert and closer to the Colorado River, you get the larger mesquite. Down in that area, it's one of the main food sources. As you can see, these pods on it are still very young. But as it matures, they grow into kind of string bean, long pea pods. They would grind them into kind of a meal.
And of course, this is the desert apricot. Different times of the year, you have the desert lily, and they come out in springtime. And you pull it up, it's like an onion. There's the jojoba.
So this is the jojoba. It'll get to be about 5 or 6 feet tall. Fruits are kind of like an olive size. And there's not a lot of meat on them, but they would grind them up. And then we know all along the ridgeline and these mountains, we have milling areas where remnants of the seeds and the millings can be found.
We would cut barrel cactus and slice it like pineapple slices. And cut off the stickers. We could use those for fishing hooks too.
That's the holly leaf cherry. And in the fall, these bushes are loaded with red fruit. They are kind of like a cherry taste. You only eat the outside, but you can also grind up the seed and use that as well. What they would do is when you open these up, there's actually a nut inside of it. A small nut inside. That would be ground up and eaten. Or you might even be able to eat it straight out of the shell. Tastes like Christmas cookies. The aftertaste does. Oh, that's pretty good.
Chia. Chia was also harvested. It's a very good food, and it makes a very good drink. Also harvesting manzanita berries. Tamu, the cattails, could be eaten too. By where the root is, it tastes just like cucumber. And also with cattails, you can use to make the thatching for houses.
The buckwheat, it grows everywhere in chaparral environment. What they would do is they would harvest the seeds, which are really small, so it's really labor intensive. But they would grind them up and then turn them into kind of flour. Harvesting
agave was also a major food source.
People really seem to be fond of the agave, and we actually have the evidence that shows that they were using it as one of their main staples. The Native Americans would harvest the agave and roast it in pits, and we have evidence of these old roasting pits. So these are the types of things we're looking for when we're looking for prehistoric roasting pits. For the most part, they're excavated very deep, so there's not a lot on the surface that we can tell. So when we find these, it's because they've been washed out, or we'll find tailings from small animal burrows. The natural soils, because of the burning and the constant use, will actually turn to almost ash and will blacken. You also see in the area there's a lot of fire-affected rocks that show signs of burning.
I remember when I first walked out there and just saw all the roasting pits and layers of it that, you know, from thousands of years ago. They dated one of the agave pits that I've seen back to 200 AD. And to me that's really fascinating because each agave pit was for one family. So knowing that had to have taken many families and many years, that really gives you a sense of how many people and how much they traveled.
And we actually have ethnographic resources saying that groups coming from Baja, coming from the desert, coming from the north, would all meet here during early spring months, March and April, and would gather agave.
It has been something that has gone dormant for a while. Most of the people haven't harvested agave in a while. In Campo, they did their agave harvest this past year. I would say possibly 100 years it's been since they've done that agave harvest.
Yeah, the agave roast we had on a reservation. It hasn't, nobody has seen that, definitely not in my generation. It was a good experience for the tribal members, and people came together, you know. I mean, the archaeologists were there, and the tribal members were there, and other tribes. We actually had, you know, more than one tribe present at the agave roast.
I think that's what I like a lot about being Kumeyaay, is that we are like social people and we always do gather and we like to be around each other. And it's a social communal thing and I like it.
People working together, digging up the agave plants and being part of it. You know, it's kind of like a team effort.
So when it comes time to harvest the agave, one of the first things we'll do is dig the pit. Then what we'll do is we'll get river rocks and we'll line the bottom with the river rocks. Then we'll go and get the agave. Now, the agave that we want is agave that has a stalk that's about a foot high or less. If it's a foot or less, there's a lot more sugar inside the agave plant.
Most of the food sources out here in this desert transition area have a very short amount of time where you can harvest them and they're actually edible. The agave we have here, once they're at that stage, they're not really edible anymore. So there's a very small window where they can come and harvest these things. That's why certain timekeeping features to let you know where you are in the year were really valuable so they wouldn't miss out on food sources. What the Native Americans have done in this area is they've collected some of the pumice and some of the basalt rocks and they've built cairns to line up directly with solar events. These cairns right behind me actually line up directly with the spring and autumn equinox. So two cairns line up with the notch and the ridge side, and then as the sun would come up, all three elements would line up directly. There's another set of cairns that lines up with the winter solstice, and there's a third set of cairns that lines up with the middle of March. Our best guess is that it points towards the agave season when it's ripest. Just after the agave comes in to season, all the rest of the fruits would come into season too, so they would make sure they were here at specific times.
Once we find these agave, then we'll get our digging sticks and we'll start prying them up. Digging stick, traditionally, it's a piece of oak about half as tall as me, and put the end in the fire. When it's been fire hardened, it'll take a lot of beating, especially oak. It's a dense wood. Now, for a good agave roast, probably want to get about 15 to 20 agaves. We'll bring them back to the roasting area and we'll light the fire. Now, when the fire is lit, it's usually lit by somebody who was born in the summertime. The reason for that is because that's the time of our rains. We're hoping for, bountiful rains. Then the oak trees, they will have a lot of acorns.
My great-grandfather, great-grandmother used to depend on those summer rains because they were a lot more consistent than they are nowadays. So it was like the monsoonal season.
So it takes about 6 to 8 hours for the fire to burn down. We'll start cutting the leaves off the agave, and we'll leave it looking like a pineapple. Then we'll soak that in water, and we'll also soak the leaves in water. We'll get as much moisture in it as possible. We'll put those agave leaves on top of the coals. Once we have a good layer, then we'll get the agave hearts, and we'll start putting those on top of that. After we've put all the agave hearts in, then we'll get the rest of the leaves and put those on top. Then we'll make another fire on top of that, and then we'll bury the whole thing. And when we bury it, we'll leave it there for a day or 2 days. Then after that, we'll dig it up, and it's ready.
It's
It's sweet, but it tastes it's a cross between like sweet potato and pineapple.
Nice and sweet, chewy, got a lot of fiber.
It tastes good. It's sweet.
When I was a young boy, I was able to taste the agave. I eaten some yesterday, and down there at the campo was brought back little memories.
To know our foods and to be able to harvest our foods, I mean, it's a very important thing to our people.
Well, I think it's important for the people to see and know about what the agave was and how there is food for the Kumeyaay people. Yeah.
The agave harvest, it brings our people back together. I mean, it brings that communal spirit when we gather the agave, when we gather the acorns, when we gather chia, when we go and gather pinyon, we go into the ocean and gather the mussels and all these things. And it also reaffirms our territory. This is our land. This is where we came from. This is our holy land. This is our promised land.
The songs that I was singing are the beginning of the bird song, the cycle in honor of the agave roast. The bird song tells a story about the Kumeyaay.
The way I was told was this whole agave harvest was a ceremony, and it was not just the food stuff, but also for rain to come.
Ceremonies are important because they connect us to the past. Our ceremonies that we do now are basically the same as in ancient times. The old people went through unimaginable situations. Through all of that, they still kept some of our ceremonies because they're so important. And we keep it going because that's who we are. Indian people, Kumeyaay people.
I sang those beginning songs, so these agave roast and all the culture will carry on after today and be strong like it used to be. Those are my words. I'm hoping that's what this day brings back.
Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. Today you are listening to The Kumeyaay Way of Life. I'm your host, Jack Eit, and we are parts of an Emmy-nominated documentary, First People Kumeyaay, from Explore San Diego, originally on KPBS in 2014. It features multiple Kumeyaay folks as well as several academic scientists. We also hear the story from the Kumeyaay tradition, Coyote and the Rabbit, as told by Dr. Stanley Rodriguez, council member of the Santa Ysabel Band of the Iipay Nation of the Kumeyaay people. This is the story from the Kumeyaay tradition, Coyote and the Rabbit, as told by Stan Rodriguez. Thanks to the Siquan Band and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Produced by Kumeyaay Diagwenyo Land Conservancy. Directed by Michael Misquish. Aired in 2016.
I was taught these stories, each one, they say that they teach us how to live. They teach us how to conduct ourselves. Some of these stories are coyote stories, and we say the coyote is a great teacher because what the coyote does today are what people will do tomorrow unless they learn a lesson from the coyote. So the first coyote story I'm going to talk about is the coyote and the rabbit. When we say a long time ago, we say hiyay. And this was a long time ago, so we would say hiyay, hiyay, hiyay. There was a coyote, and this coyote was hungry, looking for something to eat. And it was dark, it was nighttime. He seen a rabbit standing by some water, a pool of water. So the coyote ran up to the rabbit and was ready to kill the rabbit and eat the rabbit. And the rabbit just looked at him and said, "Wait, what are you going to do?" And the coyote said, "I'm going to eat you. I'm going to kill you and eat you." And the rabbit said, "Why kill me and eat me when look what the people did? People left this big, huge cake of acorn meal soaking in that water down there to cool it off, but they forgot to take it. And there's enough food there for both of us for days. We can share it." And the coyote looked at that huge circle in the water. The coyote said, "Get out of here, that's going to be mine." So the rabbit said, okay, and pew, took off. So the coyote started thinking, I need to get that water out so I can get that cake of acorn meal. So the coyote started drinking the water. Kept drinking. Finally got to the end. I mean, the coyote's stomach was big, and he had to go to the bathroom a bunch of times, but he finally got there. And he put his paw where that cake is supposed to be, and all the coyote touched was mud. The coyote looked up, and there was a full moon. So what the coyote seen was the reflection of the moon in the water. So the coyote got mad, and the coyote took off, looking for that rabbit. Finally, he seen that rabbit just leaning next to this huge boulder. And the coyote said, you're not going to get away this time. I'm going to eat you. And the rabbit said, wait, you don't understand. This boulder is holding up the whole universe. And it's, for some reason, it's real wobbly. And I'm pushing to keep it up. But if it falls, the whole universe will cave in and we'll all die. Everything will die. And the coyote said, really? And the rabbit said, yes, really. So the coyote started pushing on that big rock, that huge rock. And the coyote was pushing as hard as he could. And he told the rabbit, go get some help. And the rabbit said, okay, pew, and took off. So the coyote pushed and pushed and pushed with all of his might. Finally, the coyote couldn't take it anymore. The coyote just fell down, waiting for the universe to fall. Nothing happened, nothing moved. So the coyote said, I've been tricked again. So the coyote went looking, going down the trails. And finally, the coyote seen this tall grass and seen the rabbit standing there. And the rabbit had a rattle in his paw. And the coyote said, now, I have you. You're not going to get away this time. And the rabbit said, my friend, my brother, you don't understand. And the coyote said, what? And the rabbit said, this has all been for you. He said, the people are coming down from the hill, a big group of people. And we're all going to meet here at this place. And we're going to cook deer meat. We're going to have a big feast. We're going to sing songs for you. We're going to play games in your honor. This is for you, coyote, because we honor you. And the coyote said, really? And the rabbit said, really? And the coyote said, well, what do I need to do? And the coyote said, well, the rabbit said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to hide in this grass and grab this rattle and do this. And the coyote said, like this? The rabbit said, yes. And the coyote said, why? And go, that way the people know you're here and they can make the party for you. The coyote said, okay, I'll do it. So the coyote started sitting down. The rabbit said, closer to the ground, closer to the ground. The coyote put his ears down, put his tail down. The coyote had the rattle. And the rabbit said, okay, I'll be back. The rabbit took off up the hill, the road. He stood there on the road. Here came the people. They were coming down. And they seen this rabbit just standing on the road. And the people said, what are you doing? Rabbit, get out of the way. We're human beings. We're coming down the road, coming down the path. Move out of the way. And the rabbit just stood there and said, normally I would not bother you. You do what you do. But I was down at the bottom of the hill in a matar, in a small little meadow, and there's a lot of grass there. And I noticed when I was there was a big rattlesnake, and it was shaking its tail. And I just wanted to warn you because a rattlesnake is poisonous, and you have children, and I know your children like to play, and I just don't want your kids to get hurt. And the people said, Chunyadwa, you're a liar. I said, get out of the way. And the rabbit said, okay. The rabbit moved out of the way, and the people started coming down, a whole group, a lot of people, coming. They started coming down the hill. The coyote could hear them. The coyote said, it's my time. He grabbed this rattle. The people were getting closer. The coyote turned that rattle, shook that rattle. The people stopped, and they listened. Everybody was real quiet. And the coyote thought, maybe they didn't hear me good. Then the people started backing up. They were all backing up the hill. They got where the rabbit was, and they said, you're right, rabbit. There must be a huge rattlesnake. We all heard him. And it sounds like a mean rattlesnake, too. It sounds like a dangerous one. What should we do? And the rabbit said, well, you can either go around the other way. And they said, well, that's going to take us 3 or 4 days away from where we need to go. Rabbit said, well, The other thing is, because that rattlesnake's dangerous, you could set all that grass on fire, burn the whole thing down. That way you'll have no problem with rattlesnakes anymore. And that rattlesnake won't bother you, and your kids will be safe. And the people said, that's a good idea. We're going to do that. So the people started coming down. And they surrounded that grass, and Coyote could hear that. Then he stopped. The people said that rattlesnake is still there. So what they did was they lit all that grass on fire. The coyote, he could smell that smoke. He could smell it and goes, oh, the people must have started cooking the food. Must be a barbecue. Shook it again, and then the fire came, whoo. Everything was burned. All the grass, that rattle, that coyote. So, the moral of this story is, I'm going to leave it up to you. I want you to think about it. And that's the story of the coyote and the rabbit.
As told by Stan Rodriguez. Now back to First People, the Kumeyaay from Explore San Diego, KPBS, first aired in 2014.
But now in this country, especially here in San Diego County and California, most of the tribes are really getting back into their culture. They're teaching the younger kids, we are what's around us. We are the songs we sing. We are the trees, the sky, the earth. And it's like today our younger generation are really seeing that.
Now, when we bring back our traditional food, this is not just bringing back the foods to eat, but also the story about all this.
One of the main plants that we use is right here, the acorns. They sustained our people for thousands of years.
From what I was told by the elders, all these oak trees, they were planted by Kumeyaay people, by the different families.
I've heard it called plant husbandry. It's the line between wild and agriculture.
The hunter-gatherer mentality or myth is maybe kind of, I think, oversimplified with our people, because you are shaping the landscape.
What some people think of as a wilderness, no, these were communities here.
These plants were so important to the people, they knew they couldn't just leave it to nature to provide for them. They took the acorns, they took the pinyon pine nuts and planted the forest.
Oak trees to Native Americans here in San Diego County, I would say almost sacred, and they were our livelihood.
The trees will give you acorns, and then you make your shui, which is the acorn mash.
So what Norma's doing right now is just cracking the acorns, and then she's using a rock with a hole in the middle. They usually get the rocks by the ocean. They have different holes for different sizes. So you just crack it very, top to time, like very slow, so she don't break the whole acorn.
Harvesting and making shui is a lot of work. It's very labor intensive.
I helped my stepmother. We used to go to Laguna Mountain. So we were little guys, so they put us to work.
But you got to beat the squirrels before they get it, because the squirrel will, grab the acorn.
We would go as a family. We still do that as a family, to go harvest, with the kids and grandchildren.
It was a great time to be together, build your family stronger.
And it was a great bonding adventure.
Talk about stories, the old times, some of the best times of my life.
We gather them in the late fall, around November, before the first rains.
You're getting, 50-pound sacks full of acorn, and that acorn up there is about like that, around. They call it kapash. Then this tree here, they call it snyao, and it's got a different looking acorn.
Yeah, this is different kind. Well, in this basket we have different kind. We have snyao, kapash, there's the black oak, and the live oak. This is the the black oak.
Snyao.
It's snyao.
They do taste different. The live oak, snyao, that's also manzanita's named after Snyao Katun. You can see them here. They grow out of the rocks. That's what they're talking about, Snyao Katun. They grow out of the rocks. So harvesting's just the start.
Once it dried, then they took the shell off, and then there was a little thin layer around the acorn that had to dry too, and then they had a basket they call sawi, and they break it up a little bit, and then they take that with the wind coming this way, and they go like that and take that little thin coat off.
So when the acorns, they still have the skin.
So you
just put it together, and then with the wind, they would take off all the skin.
In some years, you may not have such large acorns, but you'll have the ability to store them.
And once they're dried, they can be in storage for years.
You don't get a yearly harvest. Not every plant will bloom every year. That's why they had to supplement so much of their meal with other food. The acorns weren't always reliable.
So the old people, when there was good years, they gathered a lot, put them in their granaries to store for maybe when their times were a little tight.
So they could build these granaries either on bedrock to keep animals from burrowing up from the bottom, or they would build these large scaffolds upon which to elevate the granaries above the ground. The ones that were built on scaffolds, there's nothing to see anymore.
The baskets won't survive, but the lithics will. You have rocks that are shaped a certain way, but they're so camouflaged with the environment that the everyday person, when they're walking through the areas, wouldn't notice them. So what you have here is just a very simple granary. And then right near it, right up on top of the rocks here, we have milling. So they're right in close proximity to each other.
In ancient times, they would go out to the bedrocks and grind the acorns there.
On our reservation out at Sequan, we have matais all over the place, with the grinding stones of it.
So what you have right here, this is what we would call a milling slick. It's more for a rubbing or grinding than a pounding purpose. And they will have rubbed that so much that it'll be smooth.
For grinding, granite is a very, very common material for monos, ground stone, to actually make mortars inside of. It's pretty common in San Diego.
So it's very important when we're grinding the acorns, they have to be very dry, otherwise because the acorn have a lot of oil on it, so it will be very hard to work when it's wet. It'll take a long time because I have to be grinding by hand.
With my grandmother, Peliat was her name, she'd take and crush him over her head like that, making that shawi by hand. But nowadays they just shell that thing, put it in that machine and plug it in the electric and grind it,
Usually we use a corn grinder now.
Now we have other modern grinding, like coffee grinder and other items like that.
This modern life we have busy schedules. We have to find a way to save time, but still keep the tradition, still keep eating the traditional foods.
Doing this way, it would take 10 times more, but this is one of the traditional ways we still do. So right now she's making sure all the acorn flour is very fine and don't have big pieces on it.
And then once they beat it into flour, and then they poured water on that to leach the bitterness out.
So when they put the water is washing all the acorn flour, so it's taking all the tannic acid in the acorn. Because you can taste it like that, it's very bitter. So if you add water and you wash that like that, all the bitter will go away.
Well, mostly I help with the cooking, because the cooking you have to leach it and you let it sit in this thing for a long time and let it leach out the toxins. And that whole time you're sitting over it with a little handful and you're just pouring water into your hand and leaching it. And it takes a long time. I sat there for an hour and a half like that one time.
When you taste it's not that bitter, and then you start to cook it in an oil. So you put a little bit of water, and then you put it in the fire and then you boil it for maybe 10 minutes or so. So when this is cooked already, and then you put it in another container, and then you cut it in pieces. This is the final product, and then you can see the pieces.
Yeah, I always have to eat some shui, and I didn't like it when I was younger. I used to be blah. Tell my grandma. My grandma would make me eat it. They always say you have to eat it a little bit, especially at the candle lighting or the graveyard cleaning. They say you should, because you're eating for the people in the past. So
it has an acquired taste, almost like poi from Hawaii.
And now I like it tortilla with dip it in my beans or something, and I think it's good.
Tastes good, if you know what it is. And and if you put what's behind the meaning of it all and how you feel about it and how you feel about yourself and your tribe and your people and the struggles they did, and it's still here to the point we can look at that tree and said, that tree fed our people 10,000 years ago.
Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media for an extended version of this interview as well as other benefits. We encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. Today you are listening to the Kumeyaay Way of Life. I'm your host, Jack Eit, and we are parts of an Emmy-nominated documentary, First People Kumeyaay, from Explore San Diego, originally on KPBS in 2014. It features multiple Kumeyaay folks as well as several academic scientists.
So you're looking at now what's known now as the Colorado Desert, used to be the old ancient Lake Kumeyaay. 300 or 400 years ago, this entire valley, almost all the way out to Baja, was a freshwater lake.
You know, ancient times, this used to be a giant freshwater lake, and there's maps that you can see and that show the footprint.
Lake Kumeyaay was over 100 miles long, 35 miles wide, and over 350 feet deep. It was formed when the Colorado River silted up its bed on the south side where it flowed into the Gulf of California. Large floods could cause it to divert its flow north, and the entire flow of the river would cascade into the Salton Trough, which is 250 feet below sea level. Once the Colorado River could divert back into the Gulf of California, it would take approximately 60 years for the lake to recede through evaporation. Lake Kumeyaay in the last 1,000 years has filled and receded at least 4 times. And we know that there were many more of these fillings before that time, going back thousands of years.
When you get down there, a lot of the sites we find are on a specific elevation line.
You can see along the hillside there, some of the lines, and along here, of course, where it used to be, where the lake used to be.
Probably the earliest Lake Kumeyaay shoreline that we know about that is associated with Native Americans is well over 3,000 years old.
You can almost tell exactly where the shoreline is by where you find the sites, because they follow the ebb and curve of it and they follow the washes into it. It used to be a major fish and shellfish resource for all the people who are living here. The Kumeyaay would come here and they would fish and they would gather shellfish. They built fish traps along, this is actually called Fish Creek Mountains.
And these are some of the original fish traps when the lake was higher in the earlier periods.
We don't know exactly how these fish traps were used, but the hypothesis is that the Native Americans were exploiting the natural spawning behavior of fish that occurred in Lake Kumeyaay. They would come into the shallow waters to spawn and lay their eggs in gravelly nests, precisely in the kinds of locations where you find fish traps.
Because fish seem to naturally, they'll frolic around in rocks and places like that. And then they can also be influenced by humans. You know, you can shoo them into a place where they'll be trapped.
The other type of fish traps that occur are alignments of rocks, either U or V-shaped rocks, with the apex of the V always pointing down into the water.
Somewhere like this, you can herd the fish in here. You can use an atlatl, you can use a spear, you can use an arrow when you get them in a more shallow area. I mean, then they can only go so far, or you can net them.
The fact that we find these fish traps in neat parallel rows following the wave-cut terraces of the shoreline as they recede suggests that many that we see today are from that very last infilling between 1600 and 1700 AD. And by 1750 or so, the lake was completely dried up.
Because there's no water here, it started with the Spanish and people engineered the Colorado River to not fill up this basin anymore. It's a very different landscape since you take the water out of the picture. So there's a lot of stuff going on that's kind of affected how we see it now than how they were seeing it in the past. Like most transitory people, the majority of their food was gathered. A quarter to a third was probably meat products. And mostly in this area, you got deer, you got rabbit.
Most all the men hunted, and this was something that we did. I mean, we had to get food. So every boy, when they became a man, learned how to make a bow. Well, there's different kinds of wood to make bows. Some people will make them out of willow or halasi. Some people will make them out of señal or oak. This is sea or elderberry. So the first thing you need to do is you got to peel this. So that's what I'm doing now. The animals that were hunted with bows were pretty much everything. I mean, from rabbits to deer and mountain sheep. Heard in the old days even bear were taken with bows. Stone tools were originally used to strip and split the stave. There's a hard blue stone that's out by Hukumba, bluish gray stone. Could be used to split, just hammer right through.
This is a very, very common tool stone that we find throughout San Diego County in archaeological assemblages. You can sort of see it's a sort of greenish gray material. And I've already got a few types of tools over here that represent the archaeological tool assemblage. This tool right here is a chisel tool. And it has very interesting wear patterns on it that indicates that one end is being used as a chisel while the other end is being battered with a hammer. When you look at this piece, you now see battering damage on one end from hitting it with a hammer stone, and then this end has a particular kind of damage on it from using it on the wood. So you can look at this then and analyze it in the lab and have an idea of how it's being used.
But nowadays what we use is, we'll use what we got, anything. So what I use is a machete, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer it through and split. So I'm not going to hammer it here, but that's how we would do it. We would start splitting it, and what we get then is we'll get half this, we'll have it split like this. So once we do that, what many people will use in the old days would use a stone. But now, thanks to modern technology, we can use a rasp, and we'll bring this down until we lose most of this pith. And it takes a little while. After about a week of taking it down, it comes out to about like this. So this is what we have. Do you see? Most of it's been taken down. Now, the next thing we need to make is string.
People have been making string out of plants for probably at least 20,000 years. There's images of women wearing string garments that date back that far. This is just an old agave leaf. It's actually a little too far gone for good spinning, but you can see that the fibers in this leaf would also be able to be used, kind of process them down into these long, nice strands.
So we were showing how to get cordage out of this. What we did was we threw some of the agave leaves in the fire, got them toasty, and then after that what we do is we peel the skin off. Now the thing about the agave, if you get it raw, the juice from it is caustic, it's like acid, and it burns. But when you put it over the fire, it neutralizes that. So that's why we're able to handle this. So once we got this all cleaned, then what we do is with a rock, pound it. Agave has a lot of material that's highly valued for the thing that we make. Now,
With a piece of wood, we scrape off the plant material and it leaves the threads. So this is how we make the string for this. And I like to make my own string. That way I know what parts are strong, what parts are not.
Mm-hmm. So should we put two pieces together of the agave? Probably like that. Just add a little bit of water so it'll be more flexible. And then you have to roll it and do it like a little bit at a time. And the agave, of course, is very, very strong and can be used to make like fishing nets and, you know, string for the bow and, you know, go tie it in there. Mm-hmm. So go forward and go backward.
Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the gatherings, it's just really fun, and you dance and you play peon, and it's just like a great time to like get together. Peon is a game, a traditional Indian game. You play it at night around a fire.
And peon, there's 2 teams of 4, and there's a koimi, or he's like the referee.
And you have bones, a black bone and a white bone, and you hide them in your hands, and then they try and guess what hand you have the black and white bone in.
Right here? Where Chico? He says, where Chico? Call them both.
You're trying to guess, you're trying to catch as many people as you can and guess what they have in their hands, basically. And then you give the bones over, and when all the bones are given to that side, then it's their turn to go.
Where Chico? Where Chico? It's okay. Hold them up, boys. He caught these 3 right here, and he passed. So they get 1 stick.
And you get sticks, they're like points.
There's 15 sticks, and the point is to get all 15 sticks on your side.
And if you get all the points, you win, but sometimes the game can go back and forth.
Ahuera, he says. Ahuera. Missed him. Caught Leroy. Caught Bobby. Caught these 2. Missed these 2 over here.
And I've seen people play and get down to 1 stick and lose all the sticks back and then go the same way back and forth. So it goes for a long time.
One time when I played peon in Manzanita, we started when it got dark, and we played all the way until 7 in the morning.
It's always been a real fun thing to do, and it's something that we do at our cultural gatherings now. Like, everybody has peon tournaments.
And one of our elders told us 1932 was the last peon games here at Manzanita. There's been a lot of work that has gone in from the elders and the tribal leaders to start this renaissance of the Kumeyaay people.
We have an opportunity now to move into the future by bringing what's there in the past and letting everybody know what it is and how we got here.
I hold a piece of pottery, or like I touch the milling, and I get transported, and I can see the people milling, and I can feel like the people using it. And to me, it's that human element. Somebody sat here 500 years ago and milled this so that they could survive in this landscape, and it's amazing. It's a beautiful place, but it's a harsh environment, and that's one of the main reasons we do what we do, is to preserve that sense of feeling.
When I grew up in the schools, you know, it was hard for me to be proud of who I was. You know, I always sat in the back because it was kind of embarrassing, reading all these things, saying, we're savages and we're living like less than animals and stuff like that, you know. Now, from what I'm learning now, it's a beautiful way of life, you know.
The natural ways are better, and using all of the plant or using, everything from an animal, that's the way to honor that and not upset the ecosystem of the earth.
Respect for our land, respect for the animals, the plants, the creator, and the past. That's a foundation to our whole culture.
So this is something that is exciting when I see all of our people come together, because our culture was like an askai, a pot, that when the outsiders came, it crushed the askai, crushed the pot, and different communities, different people had a piece to that pot. But now that we're coming back together again, and we're putting this pot back together, we're putting together what we are, our culture.
Where it's significant for the tribes, it's also significant in that it's a way that humans interacted with their environment that's unique and specific to this area and also to the world. It's literally the world's history. So it's everybody's heritage to be proud of and to try and protect.
I want to be able to hand this to my children. So important, for our people to know who they are and keep that within them, because it's good for right here.
Well, when I learned to dance to the bird songs and to play peon and all that when I was probably like 10, 11 years old, I think it made a big difference in who I am, because I feel more spiritually connected, and because of the culture, because of the songs, because the meaning and the symbolism behind everything.
Now you can see the young people are excited to get up there and dance and play peon and go to the ceremonies, and I'm glad I'm here at this time. It's a great time to be Kumeyaay.
Okay, we all good? Okay. Just as the sun rises to begin its journey for the day, we too begin the journey of our lives as children. There are storms and mountains in the path. They change our rays of light and our colors. I come from this dirt and this land, and I will return to it one final time. Until that day comes, I will shine as the brightest flames of the sun. Those around me will know my connection to this place and all that is life. Everything that flows in this land has flowed through my blood, my eyes, my breath, and my heart.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us. This has been the Kumeyaay Way of Life. For an extended version of this interview, become a member of our Patreon. Please connect with us on social media at Eco Justice Radio, SoCal 350, and Wilder Utopia. If you like what you've heard and you want others to be informed, subscribe, share the episodes, and help us continue our efforts by joining our Patreon or making a tax-deductible donation to the show. Project of SoCal 350. The show can be found on KPFK, KPFT, all major podcast apps, and at ecojusticeradio.org. Executive producer and host, myself, Jack Eit, co-host Jessica Aldridge, co-host Carrie Kim, and engineer and original music by Blake Quake Beats. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.